Hi, my name's Simeon King from Turf Design Studio, and we've been uh, working on the public domain plan for Northbridge Local Centre since about March this year, right at the beginning of COVID. So it's been a challenging time to work on some public domain plans, but we have taken them quite some distance now and they're ready to be discussed and presented to the public. The local context here shows Northbridge and Sailors Bay Road, the Northbridge Peninsula that runs pretty much east-west and has this great spine road that runs east-west, Sailors Bay Road. Our study area is highlighted in this map in yellow, and it contains the three centres within that, like the sub-centres. There's Northbridge Local Centre up the top, at the west end, Northbridge Junction, which is between Bellambi Street and Euroka Street, and the terminus, which is the Winona Road shops down at the east end near Northbridge Public School and the Oval. Here's an aerial view that looks east from above Pyala Road shops, and it shows that chain of centres that run eastward down toward the water, and you can see the harbour through in the background and the leafy streets of Northbridge. And this is the study area in detail and the sort of scale of the centres. So Northbridge Centre is about a 300 metre long centre. Northbridge Junction is around 200 metres between Bellambi Street and Euroka, and Northbridge, the terminus down at Winona, is around 200 metres as well between the library and the school. Simplified as a diagram, this shows how these centres work, and the pink is the main shopping centre of Northbridge Local Centre, which is really a district level shopping attractor with a main shopping centre, supermarkets, and there's a few offices and apartments and things in that centre. Northbridge Junction is really a traditional high street that has shops on both sides of the street. It retains its original character, has some convenience retail, a few professional services, and a little bit of new residential that has been added lately, and some seniors living. The terminus in the east is really a classic corner shop setup with 3 or 4 shops, some specialists. There's a few specialist services and GPs and things down in that. So each of these have different scales and different catchments, depending on where they are and what they're doing. In Willoughby Council has undertaken a draft local centre strategy, which is looking forward to 2036, that sees some future opportunities to increase the number of dwellings, commercial and retail opportunities within Northbridge Centre, and also a great deal of new public domain that is shown there in green. This rearrangement and increase in density is still in the study process, but these things are considered in our work. Part of that process was looking to find more open space for community meeting and places to meet up and hang out. There's also been some traffic studies that have looked across the whole Willoughby area. Northbridge has a lot of vehicle movements in it, public transport as well as private cars, and there are quite a lot of people walking and moving around. There's some big car parks to navigate. There's lots of kids that get on and off buses and get around to schools. Some of the issues identified were around cycling, pedestrian crossings, a lack of crossings in some locations, a lack of threshold and gateway treatments that slow vehicles down, and also some narrow footpaths and some non-compliant hardware, I guess, like ramps and tactile indicators and refuges and so on. So through this project, we'll be able to address some of those and also reduce traffic speed where we can. There was also some co-design workshops that were done late last year and early this year that prior to us working on the project, but we were handed reports that summarized those workshops. There were 10 principles that were developed in the first workshop, with some high priority issues that came out of that, including adding planter boxes, seating, footpath dining, and new paving on Sailors Bay Road, widening footpaths and bringing in more greenery and creating a more inviting and amenable street character, creating potentially a pedestrian mall with outdoor alfresco dining on Bellambi, upgrading the pedestrian connection on Sailors Bay Road from the plaza to the east end of Sailors Bay Road, so to the junction. And then also the workshop 2 looked at slowing traffic on Sailors Bay Road. These principles were also expanded on through that process. I won't go into those tonight, but they all have been published and can be seen on the council website. So this in detail is the study area we're looking at tonight, which is basically the western end of Sailors Bay Road. So we've got the Northbridge local centre around the shopping centre, and the Northbridge Junction from Bellambi to Euroka. Council's identified staging for this part of the project, and that will be developed over the next year or two. But stage 1 is the east end, which we call Northbridge Junction. Stage 2 would be Bellambi Square and the redesign of Bellambi Street north of the square. And then stage 3 is the arterial road components, including Eastern Valley Way, Sailors Bay Road, Strathallan Avenue, Harden Avenue, and a small part of Baringa Road where it meets Strathallan. The existing conditions, we'll run through a quick summary of those. There's a lot of issues. Not all of them are insurmountable by any means. Sailors Bay Road has some really big intersections due to the arterial nature of the road, and they're shown in those grey circles where there's a lot of traffic movements in those, a lot of right-hand turns as well for people accessing both shops and the residential areas. Highlighted in yellow is the sort of threshold areas where the character of the street changes. There's less retail on those, but they are threshold areas and that's around about 100 metres shown there, that could be improved to create a better sense of amenity in those spots. And then as you go down Strathallan Avenue on the right, obviously the huge amount of movements at Sailors Bay Road and Strathallan are fairly complex, and with a sort of a T-junction on arterial roads, an unusual situation, and there's a lot of issues with that crossing. There's also a desire to cross at Baringa Road east-west as well that needs to be accommodated. And along within Northbridge, these are some of the existing conditions. Generally brick paving in most locations. There are some big elements of road infrastructure, like the big freeway signs, that really are a negative component in a public street. There's some old furniture and obviously a little bit close to the street in places. There's also bus stop areas and things that are under cover of the awnings. There's also quite a range of paving materials. Brick is used, but it's been used in 3 or 4 different ways. There's also concrete with brick, and there's plain concrete, and also some granite and stone paving that's used in some private locations. And there's a lovely green quality through Northbridge, and there's quite a wide variety of tree species and tree types, and they all create different identities of the road space and the streetscape, whether they're the big plane trees that create that really beautiful buffer with the big trunks, and also provides a sunshine in winter and a really nice canopy in summer. And then the great brush box residential streets that run through many streets in Northbridge, and we think that's a really strong character for the whole peninsula. These 80 to 90-year-old brush box planted streets from the sort of Federation era of when Northbridge was first developed. There's also a range of new street furniture and old furniture and temporary furniture that need to be reconsidered and upgraded, and locations reconsidered. So this is Northbridge Junction between Bellambi and Euroka Street. This centre, it has shopping, obviously shopping on both sides. It's been identified that we'd need to improve the movement or the circulation between the north side and the south side, somewhere in the middle. There's a big bus stop near Bellambi Street intersection, which is empty most of the day. The buses do drop off people there, but most of the time that's quite an empty space at the corner, and it's not a great signal to this bit of the high street. There's really good existing form and structure, like the buildings on this street are really, a lot of them are original. There's awnings on the footpath, which encourages window shopping and people walking up and down and promenading and milling around on the street, which creates a good, it has a good, I guess, dimension and size and scale for the public. So yeah, these are all the positives with this part of Sailors Bay Road. Awnings on both sides of the street in a very sort of traditional Sydney high street manner. The shops are interesting. There's things happening above them. There's good materials. It's walkable and accessible because it's level, and it's obviously closer to the residential catchment. There's some retail that hits the street, and there's some good original shop fronts and so on the street. And there's also been some new development, some residential development that's contributed to the street, and some gardens as well. And these elements are things that are problematic within this street environment at the moment, like the gateway to the eastern part of Sailors Bay Road is quite open and empty. That top left photo there. It's got a big bus stop, very busy intersection, and it doesn't really signal anything much when you enter into that street. There's also been some big driveways that have been approved into developments that are quite negative, like contribute negatively to the streetscape. There is a bit of a pedestrian black spot at Bellambi Street where we have cars turning left into that section, and quite a busy pedestrian crossing. Bellambi Street as well is a very wide open street, and it's a really good level space that has a lot of potential, and we'll talk about that later. But at the moment it has fairly poor public amenity. It's quite exposed. There's not a lot of trees there. It's very hot in summer and so on. And there are some other areas of low amenity immediately adjacent to Bellambi Street where there are cars parking on the on the side of the street on the east side. There are some there's nature strips, like some simple lawn nature strips. There's some remnant bottle brushes and other planting, but it's very uncoordinated. There has been some new, the planting at the bottom is sort of an indicative of, is new planting at the aged care centre along there, which we thought provided some interesting character and texture and scale to the street. So after working through this with council and going through the co-design process and understanding what the community was interested in, we came up with four key principles that help drive what we're doing and what council's approach is in the design process. So principle one is creating streets that are for people, and that's about a lot of the design decisions being all about creating much more public amenity for people that are walking, wider footpaths where we can get them, easier streets to cross so you can do your shopping on one side and easily cross to the shop or a bus or your car even parked on the other side of the street. We also want to see increased street activity. So we all know that the more people we get on the street and the more activity we get on the street, basically footfall increases in business. Trade should increase through that. So if we can have retail spilling onto the street, so this is an example with a florist, but it could be other traders, outdoor dining as well, creates those hubs of activity. And there's been a lot of work actually done this year by the New South Wales government to increase public outdoor space based on COVID requirements. And there's a lot of interest in, particularly from cafes and restaurants, to have more outdoor dining. Increasing the footpath should allow us to do that and provide more outdoor dining, which then provides a safer and more interesting place for people to hang out and be in, and they want to be there. Part of that street design, we want the street to be also sustainable but also beautiful. So through the planting of mass planting, underplanting with interesting textures, significant street trees that provide more shade. So we'd like to provide more canopy to the street, and there's generally a directive now to increase urban tree canopy through the Department of Planning and the New South Wales government. Trees can really help provide that amenity and attractiveness for outdoor dining, walking, cycling, and all of those things, particularly in our warm summers. And the last bit is to create some delight in all of this. Obviously it needs to function and we want people to be there, but we also want moments where people have surprise, delight. There could be artworks, interpretation in the footpath. The gardens will create that delight. But I think it's a really important part of our work is to bring some delight to public space. It's not just a functional thing. It needs to invoke some emotions and some interest and some response. So this gives an idea of the public domain approach, and we had carved Sailors Boat Road into these three sections with a slightly different palette for the local centre, where we have a busy street and the arterial road runs through that streetscape. And then when we get to High Street, that described by that circle, we want to have a sort of gateway experience when you enter into Sailors Bay Road East from either Strathallan or Sailors Bay Road West. So once you enter into the more local neighbourhood part of Northbridge, everything slows down a bit. There's a bit more activity on the street. And the design of the High Street, that part of the street will be slightly different to the design for the busy arterial road. Okay, I can see a comment there. Someone just if I use that, can people see my hand? That gateway there, that's Strathallan. It's really a diagram, but that's Strathallan and East Sailors Bay Road. So and this shows it, illustrates it more to scale. The pink area is the busy arterial road. The purple area is this sort of what we're hoping will become a bustling high street. So a place where hopefully dining, restaurants, all sorts of traders will flourish here, and you'll be happy to sit out and in an outdoor dining situation, which is very hard to do on an arterial road. So we think if we can consolidate this sort of high street character to this zone through Euroka to Bellambi and create a square at this gateway point, it will, I guess, trigger a rethinking of or how people rethink or think about this bit of the street and what they do in this part of the centre. And then the neighbourhood centre down at Woonona Road, which, you know, connects the library and the school and the Oval and the community centre. That has a real community centre or a community focus. There's like a local school and art. There's an art school and doctors and so on. So this is a real community hub. This should be a district or at least a peninsula level attraction or a destination, and then you have a major sort of regional shopping destination in the local centre. We've also worked with transport. We've got a transport consultant who has helped us with this. With the blue lines here indicate where the buses run, and we've been looking at how we can better accommodate cycling in this part of Northbridge. One thing we think that is a good option is to use encourage cyclists to use Baringa Road, as it keeps them away from buses. It's a sort of quieter, more leafy street that has some good amenity for cycling. Also, a new shared path between Strathallan and Eastern Valley Road, Eastern Valley Way on the south side is a long-term option when these residential areas are upgraded. There's also demand to get a shared path on Eastern Valley Way up to Sailors Bay Road as well. And I mentioned this earlier, but it sort of maps it out a bit clearer. The way that the streets are actually really defined by trees. So you can see Baringa Road, Euroka, Harden and Bellambi have really fantastic brush box avenues that are probably 80 to 90 years old and provide a fantastic sort of tunneled canopy. And then in the light green is the plane trees that take up the main part of the local centre. They're really the strong tree within the centre. They're a really good tree actually for harsher environments. They sort of thrive anywhere, and they provide sun in winter when it's cooler and a good shade canopy in summer. And then down Eastern Valley Way we have the natives. So between the centres there's sort of a variety, like especially along Sailors Bay Road between Euroka and Woonona, there's a variety of species along there, from oak trees to eucalypts and so on. And how we see that evolving, we think obviously keeping the plane trees and increasing the number of plane trees on Sailors Bay Road through here and on Strathallan, enhancing the brush boxes at this gateway with Baringa, bringing brush boxes into this section of Sailors Bay Road between Euroka and Bellambi, and also increasing the amount of and reinforcing, I guess, the native or Australian endemic species on Eastern Valley Way. So we'll get to the design quickly. We're getting for time. And because of the scale of this, we've had to zoom in different places. Eastern Valley Way, this is Eastern Valley Way, north is to the right of the page. We are widening footpaths and also moving the bus stop away from the area near the car wash, the Crystal Car Wash, moving it past the traffic lights and getting a shared path on the western footpath and then connecting it to the eastern footpath. This is a view, Sailors Bay Road running east-west through here, and Eastern Valley Way up here, Harden Avenue running here. A key thing, this is the shared path, bicycle path we've suggested could be built between Harden and Eastern Valley Way to allow people to cycle all the way in to the centre more easily. this footpath's quite constrained at the moment. So that will take some long-term planning through the planning system to do that, but by flagging it now, we hope it gets into long-term plans for the centre. We'll also increase the number of plane trees, so we increase that sort of effect of a canopy and tunnel through the centre. We'd really like to see this third pedestrian crossing added. We will also widen the footpaths on Harden Street on the west side, so we can get seating and gardens through here, maintaining the existing car park spaces, but also getting in a rain garden. And there's no real change to car parking spaces through here. We're just really widening out the footpath, reducing this crossing time through here, and also making the paving consistent through the centre. At the moment, there's 3 or 4 paving types in this centre. So by picking a paver, we hope to really articulate where the centre is and try and unify all these streets to contribute to it. These trees are also new on the eastern side with, the western side of Harden, and will be added to continue that brushbox avenue that runs all the way down Harden Street. So that gives you an indication of the street. We're maintaining the street curb to curb width as it is there, but getting that shared cycle path on the southern footpath. The existing boundary line is shown there, dotted, so we're having to add or gain about 2.2 metres. As we move further to the east, this is the small section between Harden and Bellambi. Basically, new paving through here, increased garden beds along the edges of the footpaths, and a rethink of the plants and species that are within those garden beds. These perform a really important function in providing buffer and amenity to fast-moving traffic and that run through here between the pedestrians and the traffic, buses in particular and trucks. So just having that 1 metre wide buffer really helps. We'll get the seating and objects away from the traffic, so people are hopefully sitting in a new public space, which we're showing here at Bellambi Square, which will involve the full closure of Bellambi Street to traffic, and that will gain us a new public domain and really a new focal point for Northbridge that will allow civic and public activities to happen here, outdoor dining, gardens, and so on. And then just heading down Strathallan Avenue, the road corridor basically remains the same, with proposing a new crossing, like a lit crossing opposite the Northbridge Hotel, as there is already a bit of demand here, and especially if we're trying to get cyclists to move along Baringa Road, there would be shared path through at this point and just over here, so people can move along east-west. Also increase the number of trees, rain gardens, but also maintaining parking as much as possible through here. And this sort of becoming a newer, like an uplifted green threshold from the south. At the moment, there's few trees in these 2 spaces, so we want to get more shade and get shade onto the black tarmac, which is quite hot. We want to reduce urban heat as much as possible. It's a little bit of example of detail, but we think like a concrete aggregate paver will be the main paver. We'll maintain the bream finished concrete where possible, and in side streets and so on. Granite sets are a small stone paver that we want to use for a bit of texture, especially where traffic enters a new zone, so they'll generally be in the road. And street furniture will be extending the use of the ARIA bench seating by Street Furniture Australia, more bike racks, new bins, and hopefully some wayfinding as well. So Northbridge Junction, this is the Bellambi Square section between Euroka and Bellambi. Our main initiatives in this section are to bring a new pedestrian crossing right in the middle. We've tried to get it as close as we can to the middle between the lights at Strathallan and the crossing down at the roundabout. So we think this will help. It helps, I guess, slow the traffic down as well. Cars need to slow down for the pedestrians, but it makes this whole area a lot more accessible, and people can shop on both sides, and seniors can easily cross the road, kids and so on as well. The big move we'd like to also add to this is to move the existing bus stop, which is in this zone near Bellambi, to the east. And this bus stop would become a thing called an in-lane bus stop, rather than the bus needing to pull over into sort of the parking zone. It stops in the lane, people get on and off. Most people here are getting off, so we think it's not a major obstruction to traffic heading east on Sailors Bay Road. Will also help slow the traffic as well in Sailors Bay Road by having more slower traffic movements. We do think, as flagged at the top here, we think this whole zone should become a 40km/h zone, or even less in the future. It could become 30. But that will also change the tone and the character of this street, and make particularly outdoor dining more attractive with slower traffic. The other main move is as I've discussed, a new square at Bellambi, which we think is around 500 square meters, and that starts to perform the function or enhance this gateway between the east and the west on Sailors Bay Road at Strathallan. And that's the plan in detail. These plans are all still available on the council website on Have Your Say. So you can see that's the in-lane bus stop down here. We do get 4 or 5 cars in this zone here, which we think will really help the retail and help the square. So you'll be able to park in this zone and frequent shops along here. And it will just create a slower, more evenly paced street that provides much better amenity. So the crossing in the middle, and then some parking and a new crossing at the roundabout. So we'd have 2 additional pedestrian crossings that just really give that idea that the street is for pedestrians and people as much as it is for east-west car movements. We've also looked at Bellambi Street, part of this closure, looking at the closure of Bellambi Street and creating a square. We've needed to rearrange the traffic. The parked cars no longer need to be angle parked because they're facing in the wrong direction. So we pretty much maintain the similar number of car spaces. We've shown 2 accessible spaces here in blue, but through redesigning the curb and the set out of spaces, we can get a bit more efficiency in this area and maintain the overall parking numbers are pretty close to what's there now. So this is the intersection I was talking about, and it's in black and white for greater effect, but it's quite an open intersection. There's always a lot of cars running through here. There's a big empty run of footpath space here where there's no protection for these traders because there's a bus stop there that's about 30 meters long. And this is an artist's impression of how this can change and really provide a new identity to Northbridge, and really it signals a different character and a different zone as you move into the eastern end of Northbridge, of Sailors Bay Road. We're looking at some palm trees, which are Australian or very Sydney cabbage tree palms, perhaps a feature jacaranda that provides a bit of seasonality, and then brush box trees, which are that strong identifiable tree of Northbridge running in the street space. This gives you an idea of a level crossing, so there'll be you won't need to drop down to the road. The crossing will be built up level to the footpaths. This is the new one in the middle of the street. And I'll just throwing these photos in just to explain what an in-lane bus stop is, and there's quite a few of them around Sydney. They're being added to in street upgrades. This is in Crown Street in Surrey Hills, which is quite busy and probably busier than Sailors Bay Road. But City of Sydney installed a in-lane bus stop here, which requires cars to stop behind it and people get on and off while the bus is waiting on an expanded curb. So there is a parking bay, but the curb comes right out to the traffic lane, which you can see there. Which means you can also get trees and all sorts of other things in that space, and it provides a whole lot more amenity and quite good visibility as well for people waiting at that bus stop too. And that's it in section. So, and in this section too, we call this sort of a flex zone, which is also, it's a parking zone, but will also be a zone for new trees. So these trees will be planted pretty much in what is the road area now, but we've strategically located those so we don't lose too many car spaces, but we gain a new tree space and some new gardens and rain gardens and things that help clean the water, the rainwater that runs off the road. Yeah, so it's the overall road corridor is about 19 meters wide. We maintain 2 traffic lanes and we have some parking and some good outdoor dining and shopping areas. This is a view south of Bellambi Street, as it is now, looking Sailors Bay Road running through here on the back. Very wide street, like far over what is required for the job that it needs to do at the moment. And then this is how we think this square can end up after a redesign and after closure. So we can get new palms in, places to sit. We think we could have loose furniture and fixed walls that people can sit on, interesting gardens. Hopefully these shops will start to open out to the square, but it's also a place that could take your Christmas tree in December. It could be a place for community events or small fairs and markets and so on. So it provides a space that isn't being that isn't provided at the moment in Northbridge. That's a quick cross section through that square that gives you an idea of the space that we can gain. And that's it in plan. It is quite it's not the biggest space in the world, but we think we can get a fair bit out of it. And at the moment, we're still providing access for our vehicle to get to a car park space at the back of the real estate agent on the corner. But it does provide, it connects straight through to the new pedestrian crossing. You can see the granite paving in the roadway here as well, which will slow cars down. And we've extended the footpath as far as we can out into Sailors Bay Road to get more garden space. These are some of the indicative plants that we would have in the square, but also on the street and in both the main part of the centre and on this high street in Northbridge Junction. So brush boxes, angophoras, plane trees, and a variety of eucalypts, bird's nest ferns, sago plums, and bromeliads. We will keep the English box hedges in the arterial section, but we'll also use other textured planting like Zanzibar and Nandina and Clivia to provide some colour and seasonality to the street space. I might just quickly go through this. In the long term, the terminus down at Winona Road can be also re-engineered. We're looking at moving the bus stop, which is currently in this row of shops, which also leaves a big empty sort of space in the street during the day when there's not a lot of bus movements. Moving the bus to the west, providing new crossings, expanding the footpath so we can encourage more outdoor dining on this side, which gets all the sun. So this is the side with the good aspect, and using paving to really unite the space. And there's some sections through that, and that's the end. I don't know how we're going for time, but pass over to you again for a minute. We're also going to take questions, so we'll take some of those questions that have been posted during the session.
Thank you, Simeon, for that very detailed analysis. I think you'll all appreciate the amount of work that goes into preparing the information and to give you probably far more of a detailed look than you may have seen in past if we were standing in the street with a few boards. Before I go into questions, what I'd like to do was to thank you for all your feedback and your chat during this, because your intimate knowledge of Northbridge does help us to kind of respond to the village needs. In terms of the next steps, the consultation is opened till the 15th of this month. Then following that closing of the consultation, comments will be reviewed. We'll be then putting a report to council in March for the adoption of the plan. And we also need to go to traffic committee. So there's still a number of detailed design aspects that need to be looked at. We will then finalise the design through till July of next year. We will then tender the project for construction in September next year and commence construction in January 22. So following that, I'd like to now open up for question and answers. I've got some on the screen, so I've got a... Oh, okay. Sorry, folks. Okay, from Councillor Norton. Now, quite often the people we don't have names to, so we might just go to the questions. So do you intend to consult with the Access Committee, Inclusion Committee and Bicycle Advisory Committee? Yes, we do. And yes, we have already started some of those consultations, but definitely. Could you please provide details of proposed plans for the car park Northbridge shops? The plan indicates they'll be built underground. I can't see any future details. That particular part of the project isn't detailed here. It's in the study area, but it's linked to future development of that area. So, and also due to budgetary constraints, we wouldn't want to be spending pretty much all the money on the car park. So we're concentrating on the village in Sailors Bay Road. And okay, can bus stops be upgraded in the whole suburb to have covers, like in many, with solar panels and tops for elderly to use at rest stops, sun shelters, encourage walking, making them uniform throughout our suburbs? Council is going through a accessibility compliance with all bus stops in the local government area. And so that will be upgraded to make them accessible in terms of providing panels and covers. We can look at that. I've got another question here. How many car spaces will be lost in these plans? Currently, we have around about 44 car spaces in Bellambi and in Sailors Bay Road, east of Strathallan. And we've need to run through detailed design at this stage and also through traffic committee, but the proposal at this stage is looking at retaining 38 car spaces. So there would be a loss of 6 in Bellambi. There would be a loss of only 1 due to the reconfiguration to 90-degree parking.
Shall I take this other question?
Sure.
Here? There's a question here. If you close Bellambi, there will only be access to a large part of Northbridge by Euroka. We have allowed for emergency vehicles to still be able to move through the plaza as required. At the moment, Bellambi is only left in and left out, so you can't turn right into Sailors Bay Road if you're at that intersection and you already need to run down to Euroka. So the traffic consultants calculated it was roughly a 2-minute imposition on some residents in that corner. So we think for the gains that everyone that lives around that end, it's worthwhile. There is a comment here also to please call it a piazza, which we'll take as a comment, but I think at the name Bellambi Square was definitely just a working title, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that will have suggestions for names, and that will, I guess, happen in the next year or so.
Just say the questions are kind of rolling in, which is great. So if we don't get to your question tonight, we will get a response to you on the Have You Say project page.
Yeah. There's one here saying, can the rainwater be collected to water the new trees in, like in Chatswood? Yes, we definitely have intentions to install what are called rain gardens, which use the runoff stormwater, and it stays in the tree planted zone, so the water will help the tree to grow, and also the garden, and also that using rain gardens reduces the amount of toxic runoffs and things into the harbour, so it's really good for the harbour as well. So that's a big tick. Yes, we can do that. Another question: could there be a small amphitheatre in New Bellambi Street space to encourage local singing groups and meeting spaces? It may not be an amphitheatre, but it could be a small stage, perhaps. Got a question here: desire not to move the bus stop in front of Bellambi Street. People use this for plaza shopping stop as well as for people who live in Bellambi Street and those down the hill from there. The stop will only move around 80 meters from where it is. It's not a huge imposition. We think the gains in it actually provides a bit more car park spaces on the north side, and it helps us balance the street a bit better with where people are getting on and off the bus. And the traffic studies seem to suggest that it will be a positive move.
So will mature tree plantings be used to, or we have to wait for years for the pretty illustrations to become real? Well, they will be semi-mature. Yes, it will take time for the trees to grow. It's quite difficult to find trees of that size, and the infrastructure that's required to install them would mean major excavation within the street. So it is actually better to provide a semi-mature tree and give it time to grow into the location.
Question about more driveway access to the apartments at the top of Bellambi Street, and how many parking spaces will be lost overall in this zone. We think only 1 or 2 car spaces will be lost in Bellambi, and that depends as well on how many accessible car spaces there are, because we've shown 2 and they take up a bit more space. So if there's only 1, we'll almost be on balance with the existing parking, because we've re-engineered them and made the parking spaces a little bit narrower, like back to a standard. They're quite wide at the moment because they're angled. Making them right angled is a bit more efficient, and it's easier for people to come in and turn around and go back to the north.
And there'll be emergency access provided through the square, so there will be access available. Yeah,
and council service vehicles and things will also need to access the square. Have council considered access through Kings Park and better use of the park? Yes, it's definitely something we think needs to be considered. Hopefully improving Harden Avenue and the footpath on the same side as Kings Park will help connect it. It's a little bit isolated at the moment, the way that the private lanes run around that and the way that the shopping centre backs onto it. So that's a long-term problem, I think. And maybe with the upgrade of the shopping centre, the park will contribute to a better public space, I think.
There's a question here: have residents in Keola Street been consulted about the changes to Bellambi, which will increase traffic in their street? This is consultation now that we're going through, so we are kind of out there notifying this is a proposed plan at this point in time. When they get developed into further detail, any kind of affected areas will be further consulted with over time. We've only got a minute or so left, so we'll go through a couple of last questions.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of questions on the bus stops here. Look, the main reason for one of the advantages of moving the bus stops further east is it frees up the space in front of already in those cafes, and also in terms of turning from Strathallan into Sailors Bay, it just provides a bit more easier, better traffic flow. What else have we got? Details proposed. No,
there's one here about the bike crossing outside hotel. Will there be signals which stop the traffic up and down Strathallan? Yes, so the pending studies and also dealing with the RMS, we would like to see a pedestrian crossing there, like a push button crossing at that point. And I guess there will be some studies on how that impacts on traffic flow in Strathallan. But as we said earlier, we do want it to be people focused, so it should be easy for kids and mums and everyone to cross at that intersection and not have to hover on a refuge island at the moment in fast flowing traffic. So
we've got a positive one here from Catherine. I love the idea of Bellambi Square opening the shops out, more pedestrian crossings, slowing traffic down, more green space would be much nicer at present. Harden and Bellambi are very unattractive. So that's kind of, I guess, summing up the intention here is providing more amenity in the village area, providing more landscaping, providing a more people-friendly space is probably summing up the intention of the proposed master plan that we're looking at this point in time. And I think at this stage we're about to run out of time here. So again, any questions, keep them coming in. There is we're still open until the 15th. We look forward to hearing your views on the proposal, and I'd like to thank all people that have attended the webinar tonight and giving us your feedback. I'd like to again thank the councillors, thank staff here that assisted. Wish you all Merry Christmas and a safe and Happy New Year.